That's pretty cool, right? Come on. If that didn't stir your heart a little bit, you're like Tin Man. We got to go see the wizard or something. My goodness, that gets me every single time. Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. We are so glad you are here. Quick apology for the lack of chairs for you guys all who were standing for so long in the back. But thank you for your patience. And we are really glad that you're here, even if I can barely see you back there. But really, thank you so much for your patience. So anyway, we're here at Christmas time, and I'm watching this video and the star on the tree, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is what we do. Many of us actually have stars on our tree. Like, what do you guys have on your tree? What's on the top of your tree? What do you guys put on your top? What's your topper? What's that? An angel, right? The angel, because of the Annunciation and the angels that appeared to the shepherds. It's to remind us of that incredible and powerful moment. How many have stars? Do we have a lot of stars? Yeah, a whole bunch of you put stars up. And so last night, we did this exact service last night, and I told everyone, I was like, hey, I thought I was going to go take a picture of the top of our tree and show you guys that I have a star on the tree. And then I went into the family room, and I realized I don't have a star on the tree. Like, it's actually, my point I'm making tonight is that we all have these stars because of the light of Christmas. And so I was going to take a picture, and then I realized I have a wooden deer on the top of my tree. And I was like, that's not going to really fly. I can't really tell the story of why we should all have deer on top of our tree. And so I said, yeah, we don't actually have a star on our tree. Then last night, after the service here, we had a whole bunch of friends over to our house last night. And they walk in and they start accusing me of lying. Actually, you accused me of lying. Dips, you accused me of lying. He's like, you're a liar. You have a star on your tree. And I realized we have two trees. We actually do have a littler tree in our living room that has a star on it. And so for those, if you heard it last night, if you tell the people who were here last night, I have both. I have a deer and I have a star on my tree. And so I wasn't trying to lie, Dips. All right, is that good? All right. So, yeah, we have these stars, but it's not even just the stars. It's the light of Christmas. It's everywhere, right? We decorate our homes, and we put candles in our windows, and we celebrate with a candle lighting service, because this whole picture of the light of the world, it's like this incredible moment where in here, the darkest of seasons, light comes into the world and starts pushing back the darkness, and this warms our hearts in such an incredible way. I mean, you decorate your house, and you look at your neighbors, and if they don't put enough lights up, you're like, wah, wah, wah. And then if they put up too many lights, you're like, that's a little overkill. Mine's tasteful. But, it's like there's so much about the lights because we recognize the power of light to push back the darkness. And, of course, that's what we really need, because what we actually, in darkness, what happens? We stumble along. And there's all types of darkness itself becomes a metaphor for all of the things that we can't understand, or that are overwhelming or heavy on us. They weigh heavy on us emotionally and mentally and physically. Relationally, we can enter. You can talk about people coming out of a dark place when they weren't in a dark place literally, but they were in a dark place figuratively or emotionally or relationally. And so all of these images, and so we cling to light, because bad things happen in the darkness. So we have two dogs, our dogs. You've been over, you've seen it. Pepper is our good dog. And then we have Clover. And Clover's our broken dog. She's the one that's damaged. And so Clover is a handful. And so at night, Clover, she's this beautiful, like, sable and white and black. She's she's a beautiful dog. She's just damaged. But so at night, she likes to sleep on a rug that are her same colors. So she matches the rug, and that rug is between the bed and the bathroom at night. So she's like, it's like Clover camo, and I'm stumbling around. Can't count the number of times I have stepped on her or kicked her, and she's still sitting there. This is what happens when you can't see, when you don't have enough light. This is what happens. The things around you get broken and hurt, and people get hurt, and relationships get hurt, because if we live in darkness, or if we have darkness in us, which we will absolutely have to see, then harm breaks loose in and around us all the time. And this is throughout the ages. Scholars and philosophers and poets and artists have tried to capture this incredible tension that humanity so often stumbles along in darkness. And what we need is light. And so much of what we talk about in our movies and our hopes and our dreams are wrapped up in this promise that humanity will one day not stumble around in darkness, but instead will find light. And then Jesus comes on the scene. And he goes a step further than any of the other poets and pundits. He says, not just that humanity needs light, but that he is that light. Can you imagine how brazen a comment like that? I am the light of the world. That's what he said. He's either a lunatic or quite possibly the light of the world. But there are a few other options that you get to deal with him. And that's how Jesus always showed up, making these incredible statements about who he was and his importance in the whole of the story. And how many thousands of people, countless, tens of thousands of millions, of hundreds of millions, of billions throughout history have decided that he is in fact who he said he was, the light of the world. But now here's the real kicker. When Jesus was claiming that he was the light of the world, it wasn't in a vacuum. He was actually laying claim to prophecies that were 700 years before him, from the prophet Isaiah. He actually laid claim to those prophecies that were found written in the Hebrew scriptures. So for us, that's 2,700 years ago. But for Jesus, it was still already 700 years ago. And he laid claim and started to show us a little bit of the contrast between what it means to follow the light or to live in darkness. And that's what we're going to look at here for a little bit this morning. These prophecies from the book of Isaiah. So we see that God's light will actually reveal God's gentleness in this first section. And this is so important for us to reflect on. He said, this is verse 5, chapter 8, verse 5. He said, then the Lord spoke to me again and said, my care for the people of Judah is like the gently flowing waters of Shiloh, but they have rejected it. Therefore the Lord will overwhelm them with a mighty flood from the Euphrates River, the king of Assyria, and all of his glory. The context here matters because the king of Assyria was on the prowl up along Babylon. This is where like the Assyrian Empire, modern day Iraq and Iran are, and there's this mighty Euphrates River. And God here was saying to them, listen, they've rejected the gently flowing rivers of Shiloh. And this is pretty cool because this image is of all of these like little aqueducts, viaducts that were kind of spread throughout Jerusalem, the ancient city. And it was fresh water, so they were fed from a spring. And all of these were how you got your water and your washing and your cooking and all of this kind of stuff. And people were turning away from God's gentle provision to trust in the mighty Euphrates River. But the metaphor for them there was that the trusting in the mighty Euphrates River was actually trusting in Assyria. But Assyria can't be controlled. And that king ultimately came down from where the Euphrates River is and destroyed the northern tribes, the nation of Israel. And he was saying, listen, why don't you pick me? I'm a gently flowing pool of water where you'll find life and you'll find gentleness and you'll find peace. But so many people, we don't buy this. We want power. We want strength. We want might. And God's saying, I have all of those things, but how I'm approaching you is in gentleness and meekness and kindness. That's the whole point of the incarnation. We get a baby in a manger, God in flesh, in this little helpless form, dependent on Mary and Joseph. This is mind-blowing stuff that Jesus himself said that he is meek. He's gentle. He does not have to be, and so that's the contrast you see. You either trust in his gentleness or you get swept away by the mighty Euphrates. You enter the darkness of the abyss of the waters if you refuse his overtures, which are rooted in gentleness and kindness and love. But so many of us were raised with a picture of God that he is harsh, that he's judgmental, he's critical, he's going to come down heavy on, he's going to smack you around, this is like this. So there's a lot of us, we run away from him. But we're trusting in a lie. We're looking at things through a dark lens, not through the light. If you look at God through the light of Jesus, which is what he told us to do, you'll see how approachable he is, how he literally does call us his friends with the Almighty. He calls us his children to let us know how unconditionally loved we can be if we will trust in him. How many of us refuse his overtures because we have been told, lied to, that he is harsh and he's waiting to hurt us and punish us and he can't be trusted. We run because of our guilt and our shame. This is what happened in the Garden of Eden. We sin, and so we have guilt, we have shame, and all of a sudden, what do we do when we have guilt and shame? We hide. You hide in dark places, not light places. And instead, Jesus brings the light, just like God did in the garden. And he says, this is the light of the world. Come to me. If you see us in the light of Jesus, your guilt and your shame don't make you run away from God. They make you run to him, because you see that he is actually the solution. He is the answer for your shame and for your guilt. And then he goes on to tell us that God's light reveals the deception of the world. This is one little verse. It's actually only a transition verse, but I just found it so compelling. It's verse 11. The Lord has given me a strong warning not to think like everyone else does. And this word, the phrase for thinking, has to do with walking along the way. So it's more than just thinking. It's more than physically walking. It's journeying with. And so that's why I get this idea of the deceptive values that we have, the deception of the world. It's rooted in these values, because if you're walking along the way, you're living the way that they do, you're doing the things that they do, you're abiding by their values. And he's saying, I'm giving you a strong warning. Stay away from the values in this world. They're not going to be anything good for you. Go by my values. Follow him. Embrace his values. Live the way he says, and you'll be free of so much of the heartache in life. Actually, you can just think about it. How much in your own life, if you were to just think through how you have embraced the values of the world, how much of your heartache, your misery is actually caused because you are embracing values that are not from the King, but they're from this culture. I mean, just think through your own life. Look at all the sources of things that are really painful or giving you heartache, and look at how many of them are rooted in values that aren't actually based in God's word and his revelation to us. You know, I was one of my very first. I was just fresh out of seminary. I had my little master's diploma from my Christian college that I went to, and I was placed at my first church. I got a job, I should say. We won't get placed in our non-denominational churches, but I got my very first pastoral job right up here in Long Island on the North Shore. And I was a lot younger and maybe just a tad bit more arrogant. Hopefully, I've had some progress in that area. And I had a couple that came in, and the wife had already been telling me. She was like, hey, so I got a wreck with my husband. The whole problem, the whole life is in shambles right now because my husband needs to make a whole lot of changes. I was like, okay, well, what's the deal? And she's like, oh, he's got this, he's got that, he's got this. All right, come on in. The three of us will meet. She's like, why don't you just meet with him? I'm like, no. The three of us are going to meet. We're going to hash this out. We're going to get to the bottom of all of these problems. And it ends up there really were problems in everything. So he had no friends, and he was feeling increasingly lonely. He had no spiritual pursuits. Wouldn't come to church. Wouldn't be a part of the family in that way. He felt disconnected from God, even though at one time in his life he had felt connected. His marriage was a complete wreck, total shambles. Relationship with his kids was all frayed. So he has all of these really significant issues. So I could see why she really wanted to get some help and try to turn this thing around. So I started asking about his job. Ends up, the guy really did work 70 or 80 hours a week. I know a lot of people say they work 70 or 80 hours, but do the math and see if you really do. Because I've done this exercise with dozens and dozens of people. Most people really don't work 70 hours, 70, 80 hours a week. Most shouldn't, actually. But this guy did. He was a tennis pro. And when he worked, he got paid. And when he didn't work, he didn't get paid. And so he worked 7 days a week, often 10 and 12-hour days. And sometimes would take on extra little side things to make a little bit more money. So me, in all of my amazing humility at that stage in my life, I said, good news, I can fix all of your problems. And he was like, really? Really? I'm like, absolutely. I could fix all of these problems. Everything that you just said that you want to change, that your wife wants to see change, I can fix them all. And he was like, you're kidding me. I'm like, no, absolutely not. There's only one thing you need to do. One thing? I'm like, yeah, one thing. You need to give me 10% of your work hours to spend any way I want. So give me 7 or 8 hours a week, do what I say to do, and you will fix all of these problems. And it was nothing, it wasn't like rocket surgery here. It was going to be, a date night with his wife. It was going to be morning devotions of 15 minutes a day. It was going to be dating his kids on a regular basis. It was a small group so he can make some friends and do some spiritual pursuits with a group of people. Nothing earth-shattering. It was actually all very just, pretty straightforward, what all of us ought to do if we were actually trying to grow as followers of Jesus. So I tell him all this, and he says, I can't do it. I'm like, well, you can. You're refusing to. He's like, no, I can't do it. I said, why not? He goes, because if I don't work, we can't afford the house. I said, then sell the house. He's like, I can't sell the house. I'm like, well, again, you can sell the house and you can get an apartment, you can get a smaller house somewhere else, you live in Manhasset. You could certainly sell the house and move out. He's like, yeah, but then my kids won't be in the Manhasset school district. There's another value of the world. So what? Put them in another district. Put them in Mineola. Put them in Carl Place. No, because then they wouldn't have all of the opportunities. They wouldn't hit their full potential, and we just really can't do that. I'm like, you can do it. You refuse to do it, and in fact, your wife wants all of these changes. And I said, so why is it that you feel like you can't do it? And he looks at her, and I'm like, perfect, we win, because she obviously wants all of this. So I turn to her and I say, tell him. And she looks at me and goes, no, we can't leave Manhasset. Oh. Now I see it coming. Back then I didn't see it coming. I was like, we got this one. I'm out of the gate. I'm amazing at this. They couldn't do it because of the values of the world. In fact, they didn't do it. And you can predict what happened from there. I've been journeying with Jesus decades now, a long time, trying to be a follower of the way and figuring this whole thing out with a whole lot of you for many, many years. And back in the day when I first started following Jesus, I really needed his light. And now all of these decades later, I think I need it even more. He is still revealing patterns in my heart. He's still shining light in dark places. He's still unraveling idols and lies that I have believed about myself and about others. He's still doing all of this merciful work. And then he is graciously and kindly rewiring all of those things according to his values rather than the values of the world. He's destroying these idols in my life. And this is still going on decades in. It's an incredible, incredible gift. We also find, he tells us that God's light reveals to us a life without fear. Verse 12, he says, don't call everything a conspiracy like they do, and don't live in dread of what frightens them. Make the Lord of heaven's armies holy in your life. He is the one you should fear. He is the one who should make you tremble. He will keep you safe. I love that word at the end there because he's saying, wait a second, you're dreading all of these things. You want something to fear, you should fear God. And you go, well, that's Old Testament. That's the prophets. They were always kind of mean. And so you just told me that I don't have to worry about him. He's a gently flowing river. But then and the Bible does this contrasting thing all of the time. I mean, it's brilliant. It's in the way it connects what seem to be opposites. He's saying to us here, listen, he is a gently flowing river. When you follow him and obey and serve and love, and then he is. That's who he is to you. You will find great peace and refreshment in these living waters. And if you refuse, you will bring down on your own head what is coming to all of humanity if we resist him. The flood of the Euphrates. And you go, yeah, but this is, again, Old Testament. No, Jesus said the exact same thing. Jesus said, wait a second, guys. He came on the scene. It sounds like he was quoting from this very passage, actually. He says, you fear people? You're worried about what people think. You're worried about what people are going to do to you. Jesus says, don't fear any man. You don't have to fear any single person. You want to fear someone? Fear God, who can take both body and soul and cast it in hell. That's Jesus, the Prince of Peace, telling us what's going to happen if we continue to resist his overtures. He tells us here we can live without fear. I love the fact that he mentions the conspiracies, because I'm like, this was written for the 2024. This is like, I'm going to come back to this in October, November of this year and this upcoming year and talk about conspiracies. There's nothing but conspiracies going on. And everybody gets all nervous. They get all kind of riled up. And he's saying, don't dread, right? This is what he tells them. Don't live in dread of what frightens them. Don't live in dread. Why is it? So, I read an article recently that said the millennials are now investing in gold. They're investing in gold. They're collecting gold. Many of them, I guess they're storing it, in their mattresses or something like that. What are you millennials doing with your gold? I guess you wouldn't tell us, would you? Because you're stockpiling gold because you're scared that one day everything is going to collapse and you'll have the only currency worth any value. Have you not seen a single apocalyptic movie? When in the world do you see them trading for gold when the zombies are coming? It never happens. They don't do that. When at the end, when everything breaks down, when we lose the power grid and all of the things that you fear actually happen, when all of that takes place, which Christians should not fear, when all of that takes place, gold is going to be meaningless. What are you going to make out of it? You know what you're going to want? Cigarettes. Those always trade. Cigarettes, liquor, those trade. Guns and bullets, but you won't trade those because you're going to need those. It's the end of time. And so, canned beans. Take canned beans. Forget the gold. It doesn't even make any sense. What are you guys doing? Stop it. Don't hoarding the gold. What was I talking about? I had a point. I was going, dread. Yes, so listen, dread. So the dread thing, this matters because if you think about what it is you fear, it often will reveal the things that are going on in your heart, the idols of the heart. And so what is it that you dread? And you might say, well, what I dread is that my financial security in the future won't be secure. So I'm nervous, I'm anxious. I don't have enough in savings. I don't have enough in retirement. I think the government's going to collapse on itself. Then you've got all of these dread. And he's saying, so you don't need to dread those things. You're a citizen of another kingdom. You have an inheritance that's more glorious than Eden in the holy city. That's your retirement plan. Why are you worried? Why are you dreading? You might say, I'm so nervous my kids are not going to reach their full potential. So I got to get down on them hard, and I got to drill into them, and I got to increase their isolation and loneliness. You don't say that part, but that's actually what's happening. But we do that. We pile down on them. We load up all of these responsibilities on this next generation because we're saying they have to reach their full potential because in some way I'm living vicariously through them. What is that all about? You're living in fear. You have dread that God isn't going to be working in their lives and doing what he wants to do with them and through them. And you think that you know better. And so there's fear in it. You see, we have all of these things that we dread. What is it that you dread? You want to have a great, very fruitful spiritual exercise this week as part of Advent? Take an hour and examine your heart. Just get a pencil, a little piece of paper, and write down all of the things that keep you up at night, that you keep thinking about, that you're worried about, and see where it is that you dread the things that you need not dread. I love this passage. It's such an encouragement to us that we need not dread. In fact, he takes all of these promises of darkness, all of these risks that we face, and he says, you've really got to stop seeking the light in all of the wrong places. Look at verse 19. Someone may say to you, let's ask the mediums and those who consult the spirits of the dead with their whisperings and mutterings, and they'll tell us what to do. But shouldn't people ask God for guidance? Should the living seek guidance from the dead? And this is cool because it's not just that he is obviously talking about real mediums and things like that, but most people aren't. I actually shouldn't say that anymore. A whole lot of people are still checking out horoscopes and mediums and psychics and all of that. And obviously for Christ followers, all of that is off the table. None of us should be doing any of those kinds of things, literally because of verses like this and many, many other places. But this idea is later developed in the passage, not simply about the mystics, but it's about the dead. And there's all sorts of things that the people of the past have left to us, the dead, about who we ought to be and how we ought to live. And the scriptures are saying, you have a living God. Why are you consulting the dead? When I grew up, we had to consult the saints. We actually prayed to the saints. And the idea was if you prayed to the saints, you might get what you want because you can't pray to Jesus because he's not really listening to anyone anymore. He's not really approachable. Maybe if you get Mary's attention, she can get her son's attention. This whole weird relationship when it's actually Jesus himself who's the one who loves us and hears us and listens and is our advocate. And so we don't need to think about those who are the dead, those who are from the past. And it's even more than that, because he later develops this idea to really say it's anything that leads you into darkness. Those are the promises of the dead. That's the wisdom that the dead will bring you. And so anything that brings you in that direction, that's why he says in the next verse, in verse 20, look to God's instructions and teachings. People who contradict his word are completely in the dark. They'll go from one place to another, weary and hungry, and because they are hungry, they will rage and curse their king and their God. Which is really kind of a wild verse, because not only is he starting to bring in this image of darkness in a very powerful way, and he's going to double down on it here in a second, he also gives us hungry and rage in the same sentence, which means the Bible is the first reference in history to hangry. Right there. We are hangry. You're hungry and you rage. And if you're a hangry kind of a person, it was right here all along. It's somehow linked to darkness. But you'd have to exegete it a little bit more to figure out the relationship. And he says, they will look up to heaven and down at the earth, but everywhere they look, there will be trouble and anguish and dark despair. They'll be thrown out into the darkness. So this is where he brings the whole of it. He uses 3 different words here for darkness to kind of emphasize. This is despair, it's heaviness, it's darkness, and this is the plight of humanity. And then he turns everything around and he says at the very next, and this is where the Christmas stories start to come to our minds. In 9:1, he says, nevertheless, that time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. So we're leaving the darkness behind and we're starting to move into the light. He's saying, follow here the light of the world. There will be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, will be filled with glory. In fact, you got to take a note there. Galilee of the Gentiles is an extremely unusual phrase in the Bible, because Galilee is not a Gentile city. It's a Jewish city. It's where Jesus and most of his disciples were from. And so why is he here referencing Galilee of the Gentiles? Just put a pin in that and hold it for another minute. We'll be there in a second. And then he goes on, he says, the people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in a land of deep darkness, a light will shine. You will enlarge the nation of Israel, and its people will rejoice. This is so beautiful, right? Because the last verse, he said, there will be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, by the way, that is the river and the sea that you hear so much about in the news nowadays, will be filled with glory. Then he says that you'll enlarge the nation of Israel. So there's some sort of imagery here that the Gentiles are going to be brought into the nation of Israel, and the nation of Israel is going to be expanded. It's going to be enlarged. And this is all imagery that the people of God are going to follow Messiah, and they're going to actually see the ranks of Messiah, of the kingdom of God, grow and expand. And so you wonder, right? All December we've been doing the Advent candle, and each week there's a different way, joy and peace, and so we go through the candles of the Advent, but the candle in the middle is the Christ candle. And the Christ candle, of course, is this picture. It's the symbol of Jesus as light of the world. That's his claim. He's taking this prophecy and he's saying there is going to come a day when this prophecy is going to be fulfilled because of him. That's why he is the light of the world. That was his claim. That was his promise to us. When he takes all of these and he goes, this is me. This is actually what was going on. This was the promise. And so when he gives us this, he's telling us, listen, every single one of us needs the light that Jesus offers. And some of you are here today and you have never yet settled this question. Maybe you've thought about it, maybe you've flirted with it, maybe you just come out for kind of the big holidays like a Christmas or an Easter, and that's great, and we're so glad that you are here, but maybe you've never actually stopped and said, I've never actually trusted in Jesus and what he said. Maybe that's why you're here today. Maybe you have a sense of this darkness in your own life or in your own circumstances, in your own relationships, and maybe you have a sense that you really could use the light, but for whatever reason, you haven't yet decided to trust that Jesus is that light. And maybe that's what's going on here today. Maybe at the end of the service, there's going to be a time for prayer, and the care pastors are going to be up here. And maybe that's what the gift that God is giving to you here and now today. Maybe it's time for you to surrender, move out of the darkness, and turn toward the light. There's a whole lot of you, though, here who that's not what's going on. You're already followers. You're already people of the way. You've already decided that you are actually going to walk in the way of the light that Jesus provides, the light of the world. And that's amazing, and that's great. That's fantastic. And yet when you watch that video at the beginning here, and you see that grandpa lift up his grandbaby, did it stir your heart in some way? Did you think, oh my goodness, it's so fantastic that grandpa would work so hard. He would risk so much. He would risk his own health. He would risk injury. He didn't care what the neighbors were saying. Even when his family thought he was crazy. Sounds familiar. That even when all of that was going on, he didn't care. Because a star needed to get on top of that tree. And he needed his granddaughter to know about the light of the world. He needed to let that next generation know. He needed to be a part of it. Even though other people would want to put him on the bench, he needed the world to know about the light of the world. And if that stirred your heart in any way, if you said, you go get him, Grandpa, that could be you. You could help expand Galilee to fold the Gentiles in, the nations in. You could be a part of expanding the people of God, the nation of Israel. You can actually take the message that you have had for much of your life, or maybe it's only been a few weeks or months for you as you've decided to be a follower of Jesus. Wherever you're at, you could be that man. You could be the guy who takes the message of Jesus, the light of the world, and takes it to the whole of the world. There are people all around you still in darkness, and they need to see the great light. Will you do that? Will you be that to the people all around you? Because you can be. There's a great passage, you'll know it. It's Isaiah 9. I'd like you all to stand as we read this passage together. It comes up in just a verse there. It's probably on some of your Christmas cards. Let's read it out loud together. Ready? For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. The passionate commitment of the Lord of heaven's armies will make this happen. Let me pray, Lord. What we're asking is that you would do this in us and for us. If there are people here, Lord, who are still living in the land of darkness, may they surrender their resistance. May they turn to you even here this very day, this very moment. May not another moment go by where they have not surrendered the whole of their lives to you. And Lord, for the rest of us, inspire us, encourage us, Lord. Draw us into the fullness of what it means to go out and do the work of the mission of the people of God, to expand the kingdom of God, to bring his peace and mercy and joy and love and light and life to a world that so desperately needs it. May we be those people and so much more. We pray it in the name of Jesus. Amen.